Welcome back, everyone. This is Pastor Frank DeMora giving you updates almost on a daily basis concerning what the Lord revealed to us about the last days and what is actually happening so that we can connect the dots between the Lord's warnings and the current news. And this is where I connect the dots, both sites that I have, the BibleProphecyMan.com, as you see up here, and also the End Times Research Ministry. Either one of my sites, when you go over there and you scroll down, you'll see the flaming book, The Last Chronicles of Planet Earth. It's a documentary on Bible prophecy and current events that you can get absolutely free. It's a free download for anybody that wants to read this work. It's a comprehensive study, if you will, documenting prophecies that have been fulfilled already and where we are in the process of going to fulfill the rest of the prophecies that haven't taken place yet. But today I want to discuss a very important prophecy, actually two of them, and they're talking about two different wars that are going to take place against Israel. And in the news, we see the developments that are leading up to both of these wars. Now, first war that I want to talk about is found in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39. And in this chapter, 38 and in 39, the Lord outlines exactly who it is that's going to attack Israel in the latter years. Now, that isn't Frank DeMora talking about the latter years. This is what the Lord Messiah, our God, has prophesied so many years before this war started, where he said this was going to take place in the latter years. So let me show you who's going to be involved in this war. It won't take long. The video is not going to be that long. But you need to know, if you don't know prophecy, you're going to need to know who it is that's going to attack Israel before it even happens, so that when you see it in the news, you'll understand who it was that gave you this information. Now, I'm just passing this information on to you, but it really comes from our Lord, our God, to enforce to everyone that he should be taken seriously. Our God is the only God, true God, that is able, for example, almost 3,000 years ago, about the prophecy concerning this attack that we see in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Now you see this map drawn out here. Very simply, the arrows are showing you the direction that the enemies of Israel are going to come to attack Israel. Now, when you read Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, you'll see it says that they're coming from the uttermost northern quarters. And when you take a look at Israel, which is right here, the attack is coming from this area here, the northern quarters. Now, there are going to be some of those nations that will be coming from the south, but we are specifically told to watch for the nations that will be coming directly from the northern quarters. Now, who are they? Here's a list that you see right here: Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and so forth. You could read them. I don't need to go through all of them. But for the purposes of the news that we're seeing now, I want to focus on one of the nations that the Lord told us to look at, which would be Persia. In the Old Testament, that's their name, but in modern day times, we know them as Iran. Now, when you look at the massive forces that will be coming down against the nation of Israel, one who doesn't know prophecy would think, well, this is the end of that small, tiny Jewish state. But those people who believe that would be very, very wrong, because in the prophecy in Ezekiel 38 and 39, we see that the Lord, our God, does not allow Israel to be destroyed. The forces that come against Israel during this Ezekiel 38 and 39, those chapters, it was revealed to us that 5/6 of the invading armies coming from all of these areas that you see outlined here with the arrows, 5/6 of the invading armies are going to be destroyed. Israel is going to remain a Jewish state. Now, over and over again in the news, we see the verbiage between Israel and Iran heating up. And the reason why this is happening is because the road is being prepared for this Ezekiel war that is prophesied. So take a look at the headline that came out today, June 14th, 2022, from the Jerusalem Post. Israel warns Assad will bomb palaces if Iran operations continue, report. Now I'm just going to play this report. When you go over to the Jerusalem report itself, there's a recording of the report. I'm just going to play this for you. I'll make it a little bit bigger for you so that you can easily see what's being stated here.
The Jerusalem Post was unable to independently confirm the dramatic developing story, and the IDF declined to comment. The report could either dovetail with ongoing Israeli efforts to rid itself of an Iranian threat embedded in Syria, or could be an exaggeration of such efforts by various interested parties. Based in London and owned by Saudis who have a mixed relationship with the Saudi leadership, Alaf has been used in the past by Israeli officials to reach out to the Arab world, including a famous first interview for a Saudi publication by then IDF chief Gadi Eisenkot in 2017. Eisenkot told Alaf that the IDF and the Saudis had been sharing intelligence on an ongoing basis. According to an English translation of an Alaf Arabic article, it learned from a senior source that Israel sent a message to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, warning him against continuing to cover up Iran's operations in his country and the transfer of quality weapons to Syria, and informed him that one of his palaces would be a target in the next raid carried out by Israeli fighters in Syria. Damascus bombing. The alleged threat comes days after Israel allegedly bombed Damascus International Airport, targeting shipments of advanced Iranian weapons transported by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps to Syria on civilian planes. ImageSat International, ISI, and Maxar Technologies published pictures of the impact of the attack on Friday night, hours after Syria's Ministry of Transport announced that the airport outside the Syrian capital was suspending flights due to technical disruptions. Syria's state-controlled Sana news agency claimed that Israel carried out strikes against targets south of Damascus around 4:20 on Friday morning, wounding one person and causing material damage. The satellite images showed 3 impact craters on both the military and civilian runways, rendering them inoperable, which disabled the entire airport until repair, IC said. Russian response. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova condemned the airstrikes, saying such actions put civilian airlines and civilians in danger. We are compelled to reiterate that the ongoing Israeli shelling of the territory of the Syrian Arab Republic, in violation of the basic norms of international law, is absolutely unacceptable, she said. We strongly condemn Israel's provocative attack on the most important object of the Syrian civilian infrastructure. Such irresponsible actions create serious risks for international air traffic and put the lives of innocent people in real danger, Zakharova said, adding that we demand from the Israeli side to stop this vicious practice. It was the third strike against targets in Syria blamed on Israel in less than a week and was considered an escalation in Israel's ongoing war between the wars to interdict and destroy Iran's military presence there, especially regarding advanced weapons. Alaf said that the escalation also occurred as relations between Israel and Russia have deteriorated somewhat over the Ukraine war, leading Moscow to give Iran a freer hand in its operations in Syria. Until now, Russia had played a moderating force on Iran's presence in Syria and the proximity to the border of that presence.
So here you have a report talking about how the connection between not only Syria and Israel, and Russia in Israel, and Iran in Israel, all linked to Bible prophecy of what's going to take place. And I find it ridiculous that Russia is condemning Israel for bombing, where they're trying to complete a complete destruction of the Ukrainian people. And it's really important to understand prophecy, because when you read prophecy, and we know that Isaiah chapter 17 verse 1 talks about Damascus being left in ruinous heaps, and in Jeremiah chapter 49 it talks about the same thing. And when you look at the present circumstances between these nations, you can see clearly, you can see the road of these prophecies that haven't been fulfilled yet are on the way to being completed. So what do we have? We have Israel jets going into Syria, bombing Syria. And I believe that soon this bombing is going to cause the war between Israel and these Arab nations that are bordering the nation of Israel, and that would be the Psalm 83 war. And something is going to happen to fulfill both the Isaiah chapter 17 verse 1 prophecy and the Jeremiah prophecy that you see here listed in Jeremiah chapter 49. So watching the news, if you know prophecy, you're enlightened. You're not in the dark. Watching the news without having the Lord in you, without knowing what the Lord prophesied about the future for these individual nations, you're going to be in the dark and you're not going to understand what is really happening. And what really is happening is one giant step closer to the return of the Lord Jesus Christ. And we know before Jesus Christ can come, the Antichrist has to come. And there's another host of prophecies that also lead to us, and I've shown some yesterday in my post and also in today, how the economy around the world is starting to collapse, implode on itself. Mainly, again, when we're dealing with Russia, Russia has attacked Ukraine, and the disruption of oil and wheat fertilizers is crippling a large part of the world, not just separate nations, but a large part of the world. And it's causing higher inflation, gas prices outrageous, and so forth. You know the whole gamut that I've been showing you for the past month as we're watching these prices go up and up and up, which again is fulfillment of prophecy. But there is another article that came out. Here it is, June 14, 2022. Israel warns Assad. Assad, for those of you who may not know, is the leader of Syria, will bomb palaces if Iran operations continue, report. So reinforcing what we already know. The fact of the matter is, do you really think that it's a coincidence that Iran, Russia, and Syria are all involved in the current operations with the Israeli forces bombing the same exact nations that are listed in either prophecy, the Psalm 83 or the Ezekiel 38:39 prophecy? Not a coincidence. Definitely showing us the path of fulfillment of prophecy. So when you look at other parts of the Bible, for example, in Luke chapter 21 verses 9 and 10, and Matthew chapter 24 verses 6 through 7, Jesus talks about the sign of war and rumors of wars. Well, we're already seeing Russia trying to devastate the Ukrainians. And we're seeing the footprints, as I already stated, to both wars of the Psalm and the Ezekiel war. So what should we expect? Should we expect that the bombing is going to stop? No, it's going to increase. It's going to increase to the point where a war will break out by the exact same nations that are listed in those prophecies. Now, if you haven't been following my YouTube channel, or you haven't been going over to either one of my prophecy sites, you may not know who's involved in the Psalm 83 war. And as of late, all of the activity that has been taking place in East Jerusalem because of the issue of the Temple Mount area, there's been a lot of rioting. I've talked about this on many occasions, that the Jews want to go up and pray on the Temple Mount. And the Muslims are trying to do whatever they can to keep the Jews from going up on that Temple Mount to pray and worship. But we know through prophecy that the Lord has already shown us that there is definitely going to be a third temple, Jewish temple, that will be built on the Temple Mount area. And so part of the reason why we see the conflicts ensuing by Syria, the Hezbollah, Lebanon, all these nations are listed in the Psalm 83 war. Take a look at number 10 here that I put in for you. Assyria is modern day Syria. So it doesn't doesn't surprise anyone who knows the prophecies that there's a conflict between, guess what, not only Syria, Hezbollah has been mentioned, and so has the Lebanese. Israel is warning them, you keep sending those missiles into us, we're going to annihilate you. That's what we're told. So now that you know some of the players that are involved in the Psalm 83 war, which one of them is Hezbollah, I want you to take a look at this article that came out 2 days ago on June 12th of 2022. Israeli army chief warns overwhelming force in next war with Hezbollah. So Israel knows they are going to have to go to war with the exact same people that is listed in those prophecies. The article says Israel Defense Forces IDF Chief of Staff Aviv Kachavi on Sunday warned that overwhelming force would be used in Lebanon, which is mentioned in the Psalm 83 war, during the next potential war with Hezbollah, which is also mentioned in that Psalm 83 war. Speaking at the First National Conference on the home front, Kachavi detailed the IDF strategy for responding to an attack from the radical Shiite terrorist group. In a message directed to Lebanon, the IDF's Chief of Staff, Aviv Kachavi, warned the next war against Hezbollah will be unprecedented in terms of the rate of attacks, including extensive damage and firepower. We will deal very big strikes in the war, but we will warn the residents and allow them to leave the areas. I say to the residents of Lebanon, I advise you to leave, not only at the beginning of the war, but from the beginning of tension and before the first shot is fired. I advise you to leave those areas because the attack force will be unimaginable, like nothing you have witnessed before, Kachavi said. He said the military would target rocket launchers inside homes and buildings and would target buildings used as enemy headquarters. Now, the reason why he's saying this is because in the past conflicts, the enemies of Hezbollah and the Hamas, what they have done is put rocket launchers inside homes, in schools, and hospitals. And Israel is warning if anything is launched from those areas, they're going to be taken out by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. Now, in this article, there's also a video explaining how Israel's preparing for the next war.
Training for war in foreign and unknown territory. It's a major challenge since most training is done on home soil, unless it's really taking place in unknown territory. This is what the IDF is doing in the final week of its major drill, with most training actually being carried out in Cyprus.
We are in the midst of a unique, first-of-its-kind drill, and it is a privilege to take part in it. I believe our commanders trust us, and we have a commitment to prove that they are right by trusting us.
The exercise, called Beyond the Horizon and held in cooperation with the Cypriot National Guard, is aimed at improving the readiness of the IDF for a variety of scenarios far from home. It began with the forces landing from the sea, as they might one day be asked to do in Lebanon or in Gaza. Personnel from multiple commands and branches joined them in the neighboring island for training in a variety of terrains, along with extensive combat based on multi-branch cooperation. It is also an opportunity to realistically simulate distant logistic abilities in emergency situations.
We've been training the logistic effort in the IDF various times in recent years, and we intend to bring ourselves very quickly from a calm situation to a scenario of escalation and into emergency.
The Israeli combat doctrine states that fighting must take place in enemy territory and not within Israel's borders. This is the exercise that comes as close as possible to depicting that scenario.
So I'm not sure if you heard, but they mentioned Gaza, preparing for war in Gaza. They're also mentioned in the Psalm 83 war against Israel. The article says also, every target associated with missiles and rockets will be targeted in the next war, the military leader said. a house in which a missile is located or located near a missile, an activist who deals with a missile, a command headquarters that deals with the missile, or electricity connected to a group of missiles. All of this network will be hit on the day of the war. He said that the IDF pinpointed thousands of targets in Lebanon to destroy in the event of a war, including Hezbollah headquarters, rocket-propelled grenades, and launchers. Kachavi said that the biggest threat that Israel faces is the nuclear threat and simultaneous missile attacks from all fronts. So again, in closing, I ask you this. You're seeing in the news the very nations listed, specifically the names of the nations that are going to be involved in a war with Israel. Do you think that it is a coincidence that those same people are ready to have a major conflict with Israel again? It's not a coincidence. It is a message from the Lord. Get ready, because we're closing in on the last of the last days. And what I mean by that, there has to be a period of 7 years that Jesus writes to us about in the book of Revelation. There's a tribulation period in that 7-year period. And the time of that 7-year period that will be administered by the Antichrist, that whole 7-year period of time. And after the 7 years of the reign of the Antichrist, during that tribulation period, then at the end, Jesus Christ will be coming back, and he is going to change everything on the face of this earth that is evil. We're going to have the Messiah, Jesus Christ, return and begin his rule in Jerusalem. And no matter if you believe it now or not, you're getting a message before these things take place, so that hopefully, if you reject the message now, if you reject Jesus as the Messiah now, hopefully when you see these things unfold before you on the news, that you'll turn to Christ for your salvation. It is my prayer that this video would help you realize who Jesus Christ really is. He has given us this information well in advance to show you, number one, prophecy is going to be fulfilled, and number two, he is the only one who'd be able to tell you specifically these things in advance and see them unfold just the way that he has given it to us in his scriptures. If you have any comments or you would like to contact me, you have my email address right here. You can email me. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer those questions as well. This is Pastor Frank Demora, thanking you for allowing me to keep you informed on how close we are to the return of our gracious and loving God and Messiah, Jesus Christ. God bless.